Listen, I say a lot of things on the internet, and some things are a hit, and then some things are just not. And this was one of those situations where it was just not. So, quick recap, this Washington Post article came out yesterday saying Robert F. Kennedy Jr. tried to meet with Kamala Harris to discuss cabinet job. And people were sending me this article like crazy, especially a lot of Trump supporters, which Trump is like the king of fake news, right? So I was really shocked that Trump supporters especially just believe fake news. So Kennedy put out a statement this morning kind of debunking that. Well, it was long-winded. So Nicole put out her own. She is Kennedy's VP, and she said, confirming we are not in talks with Harris. Speaking personally, they are a lost cause. Literally. And this is where I went wrong. I said, seeing how fast Republicans believe this fake news, I'm starting to think that they are a lost cause too. Once I actually thought it through, I was like, that wasn't the best thing to say. So I put this. I said, I will admit, this comment was pretty dramatic. I was bombarded with messages from Trump supporters yesterday about that news article. I was taken back by those people who were so quick to believe fake news. It's definitely not all Republicans. As other people have said, we can't lose hope on an entire group of people like that. I just hope people learn how to read news articles critically and not jump to conclusions, especially during an election year. So this is me publicly apologizing for this statement. It was not well thought out at all, and I shouldn't have said it. And I really don't believe it actually at my core. Like I said in my comment, I think individual people can be a lost cause, but just generally saying like half the country is a lost cause it's a stretch. I wouldn't go that far. But I want to be productive, and I want to show you exactly how we should be looking at these news articles and how to read them critically. So step number one is to never just read a headline and call it a day. You definitely want to get into the content of the actual article. So this is the opening paragraph to the article. Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. saw a meeting last week with Democratic nominee Kamala Harris to discuss the possibility of serving in her administration, perhaps as a cabinet secretary if he throws his support behind her campaign and she wins, according to Kennedy campaign officials. So now let's go through the article and actually look at direct quotes or links or anything they have to try to support that conclusion. So in this section, there's no direct quotes or anything, just says people familiar with the conversations, no names. Once again, no sources. And here is our first direct quote. From the beginning of this campaign, we were saying people should be talking to each other. Kennedy said Wednesday in an interview. That is the only way of unifying the country. I personally find alarming is that there is no talk of what interview it was, where it was, there's no video of it, there's no link, so I cannot find this interview anywhere. Critical thinking cap on. Does this quote actually support the headline of this article? I would say no. So then they have, Kennedy said he hopes Harris reconsiders his offer of a meeting. Quote, I think it is a strategic mistake for them. That's my perspective, unquote. Kennedy said, quote, I think they ought to be looking at every opportunity. I think it's going to be a very close race. But again, without the actual interview, what is the context of those statements? Like when he says, I think it's a strategic mistake for them, what was before that? Like what were they talking about in the interview? What was a mistake? Okay, so now they actually name someone from the campaign. They say Amaryllis Fox Kennedy, the campaign manager and daughter-in-law to the candidate, argued in an April email to Democrats obtained by the Washington Post that Biden could not win the race. As things are, Biden is going to lose. If Bobby were to drop out, Trump would win by an additional 2 states, she wrote. If Biden were to drop out, Trump would lose. Only Bobby can win this. And again, ask yourself, does that have anything to do with the headline of the article? What proof do we have that shows that he requested a meeting, and not only did that he did that with the intention to drop out and endorse Kamala Harris? There's zero evidence of that. And really what this was talking about, it seems like it's just a whole bunch of stuff taken out of context, meshed together into this article, because really what this was talking about is they were saying, hey, if you're looking for a Democratic nominee, it should be Kennedy. Because at the time, he was the only one polled that showed that he could actually beat Trump. Then they had this quote at the very end of the article saying, the only contact I have with the DNC is them suing me, Kennedy said. Once again, I beg you, I plead with you to show me exactly the proof that they had to write an article like that. He has said statements like this over and over again. The goal of my campaign is to end the polarization. I'm going to do that by talking to people on all sides and finding values and ideas we agree on. And he's been following through with that. He met with Trump and he offered the same invitation for Kamala Harris. In no way does that mean that he is looking to drop out and endorse one of the candidates. One last thing I want to leave you with. The timing was impeccable. Before this article came out, a video was released by the campaign that showed how Harris and Trump are really just in the swamp. So ask yourself, was this really just a hit piece to try to cover up that news? Just for funsies, let's watch that video together and let me know your thoughts at the end.
We're gonna drain the swamp, folks. It's gonna be so empty, such clear water. You're gonna swim in it with your kids right in Washington, D.C.
Now, if y'all believe that, I got some beachfront property on Mars I can't wait to sell you. So Robert Kennedy's plan to create unity actually involves helping us dismantle corporate capture, which is the actual swamp. And there's a really interesting example of that involves both Trump and Harris that I think we should dive into. So this example of corporate corruption involves a guy you might have heard of named Steve Mnuchin. Well, Steve Mnuchin got into a lot of trouble because he short sold people's houses by the tune of like $80,000 via foreclosure. He was the foreclosure guy. So when Kamala Harris was the Attorney General out there in Northern California, she was urged strongly by her Consumer Protection Department to prosecute Steve Mnuchin because of his corrupt foreclosure business. And she had a record of holding big banks accountable before, so it seemed like this is what she would do. But she did not. And the reason why she didn't is quite interesting. So one of Mnuchin's partners was One West Bank, and one of the shareholders in there was a dude you might have heard of named George Soros. Him again. The reason why she didn't pursue it could have something to do with Mnuchin donating large sums of money to Harris's campaign at the time. So now that Harris refuses to prosecute Mnuchin, guess who appoints him as Treasury Secretary? Donald J. Trump. Mnuchin is just one example of how both parties are subject to this kind of influence and corruption. And me as a voter, I'm concerned about if either one of them gets into office, what's changed? More and more voters are starting to see this corrupt merger, and that's also as part of driving them to become independents who identify with neither party. And we understand that when we fight each other, these corporations profit. In fact, the former CEO of BlackRock says so himself.
I think what's happening today in the markets is an endorsement of divided government.
If we want to be free from this kind of corruption, it's going to have to start with the voters. We, the people, are going to have to cast our votes for a candidate who's not part and parcel to any of this madness. And that candidate is Robert Kennedy Jr.